Is it from this chart your conclusion that the central banking cartel have brought stability to the system, or have they run a pump and dump scheme for which they can be the insiders picking everything up at the bottom of the market and then running it up and selling out at the tops? Because you're actually stopping global trade and you're wanting to size down the entire economy. And, globalization saw a bigger pot generally, and everyone generally get richer, and the cost of production get lower. Now you're reversing that. So this is hyper stagflation. Globalization was high growth, assets bubbles and low cost goods. That's what globalization gave you.
And that's we're going to rewind the clock. We're rewinding it back down.
Now you've lived that day. Now you have to sleep through its evil twin, the night.
Good afternoon, everyone. Back with me, Francis Hunt, the market sniper. So many things are changing, and what a better person to have on than right now to try to weave this tapestry of a reset, purposeful change, and the ushering in of a new era. And that's no pun intended. It is truly a new era we're entering. So I'd taken quite a few notes before our talk today, and in order as I would watch them play out here, the magnetic field now is confirmed to be declining 5% per decade. Now that is also going to be shifting our jet streams and the precipitation patterns and having a much larger effect on agricultural output and production yields, for a better term. So then we start to get all these other pieces in play. We're coming into a reset. The tariffs are now trickling back into causing a shipping crisis where ships aren't moving. Containers are stacking up across many ports in the world. China said no more U.S. beef. So then where does that one third of all American beef production used to go to China as of yesterday, but today it has nowhere to go. So then walk that daisy chain down from the slaughterhouses, the transport, the feed processors, the veterinarians, the USDA inspectors, and a million things beyond that. So you can start to see it already piling up. And now they're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, to remove the inefficiencies out of not corporate, but also government. So they're bringing in this entire new era of tech. I mean, you look at AI, it's everywhere. They slowly drip fed us this, but I do believe AI is going to be running the show moving forward. And then lastly, gold and silver. As we see, it cannot go very far without metals indicating that the devaluation of the dollar, the resetting of whatever form that takes comes in, and then we sit here today to try to piece it together. So Francis, appreciate you joining me. I know you had a couple charts up there for gold because we just broke 3,300. That is amazing. It was at 3,200 last week, and then we're at 3,300 this week. You can explain, of these kind of moves, it's truly unheard of. I mean, this much jump and this much action in price this fast is it's showing that something is in the breaking point right now, or maybe it's meant to be, like you said. And I believe also it is a planned. Everything from that we're seeing has an excuse behind it. The tariffs are the be all get all excuse for everything else that's happening, but it's planned, and it has been for some long time, not just last year, like 50 years plus. So I appreciate you joining, everybody out. This is going to be one of the most important interviews to help you structure your life moving forward. If you want to reach out to Francis after the interview, I'll leave the links below so you can make some contact. But thanks everybody for your valuable, precious time in these days when we could be getting ready for the changes. So Francis, floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back on. First of all, delighted to be back with you. And a small little early disclaimer, anything I say about America is what I consider to be the parasitic element that is controlling America and is not projected on the average American citizen at all. I love visiting there. I've always got on incredibly well with Americans. I'm talking man in the street, the political classes and those behind them and the handlers that are running it, and the orchestrated, controlled demolition of America is a massive tragedy for me. And that's what I fear is actually being orchestrated. And it's going to have a horrific cold downdraft on most of the people in terms of their living standards as well. So this is certainly a severe topic, and that statement is quite a doomer statement, and I understand that. And I'm not here to bum people out. It's an interview to get prepared. There's plenty that can be done. Life isn't over. The sun will come up. There's living, swimming in the sea, doing your favorite activity, and many other things to remind you what a gift life is. So don't, whatever you do, don't get doomer about the hard truth that I'm going to drop, because I tend not to sugarcoat it, and neither get the wrong impression about my personal views towards Americans generally as a whole. Gold is running because debt is failing.
Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Marjorie's free webinar provides you with the tools and knowledge that you need to thrive during these difficult times. You'll learn Marjorie's 3-part system for quickly producing vegetables, eggs, meat, and much more. Go to homegrown2030.com. That's homegrown2030.com, or click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video.
Simply put, a short answer, and by the way, happy new all-time high day. It's one of, I don't know, 24, 25. We've had this year already. There's more coming. Maybe it's 23. I don't know. You tell me a lie. I'm not really counting. The point is you're going to get many more. And the reason for that is we've only really just begun the devaluation of a debt that was sold as a reserve asset. That's called the bond market. And it is one of the biggest markets in the world. It actually transcends all the market caps of stock markets globally, by the way, including the American. So the debt market is far larger. It's where we borrow money into existence. So every time you have a dollar, there's actually a UST attached to it. It should be UST, USD, the liability, and then supposedly the asset that you can go buy something with. So when you take out a mortgage and you buy a home, you're originating a debt, which is actually an expansion in the money supply, and you're buying the assets. And if lots of people do that, the asset price goes up. But the minute people become net sellers, the asset price goes back down again. So it's only at the margin, at existence where you are. And if there's a lot of liquidity being provided, prices go up. And when there's a lot of liquidity being removed, they deflate. So the key thing is to understand that you're in a war. It starts out as a financial war against you, the citizen, and it's being waged on you by your government and their handlers and the central banking cartel. So in essence, they wish to continually put you on like a monkey on a greased pole. And wages are actually gone up very menially since globalization relative to the cost of assets, meaning future generations can't afford to get onto property ladders, et cetera, and you're having this broadening. And it's been because of the devaluation of money that the assets have run so hard, the excess liquidity, which means government borrowing too much, both in terms of their own expenditure and allowing consumers to borrow too much. And that has led to hypervaluations in everything that has a debt asset class attached to it. So you're going to see subprime cars, you're going to see subprime houses, you're going to see housing having to come down, second-hand cars, and this is part and parcel of this deflation. And we've never once fully let this process run. The fire never was allowed to burn its way through all the underbrush. We've always got the fire engines in and just let a patch burn, and then we've quickly reversed it and poured water and put fertilizer or whatever and grown new undergrowth and let it dry and become a fire hazard risk again. So this time the fire burns right the way through. This is not. This is the key thing most people think this is. They think it's 1987, 99, 2008 or 2020. In other words, yes, we collapse, you buy the damn dip on equities, and then you get pumped to all-time highs real quick, and you get richer for the process. This time is different. Why? If someone ever says that phrase, he must give you a very good reason, and I'm going to give you a very good reason. 2020 was the day, the late end of 2020. Technically, we called the turn in the bond market. It's the first time we made such a call. It is the funding mechanism. The bond market is where you borrow new money into existence. And it is the funding mechanism, and nobody wants it as an asset anymore. You need to think T-bill accounting, assets and liabilities. That dollar has a liability associated with it. When you take that dollar to go buy a house, you have a mortgage to pay, and someone else is buying that to get your income streams. So that's called securitization. When the appetite for buying pieces of debt to get the future income streams goes, the ability for banks and the lending system to create new money is reduced. So the whole concept of QE coming in and bailing you out and pumping your house price back up, pumping the the Mag 7 back up and the rest of the stock market is based on the ability to borrow. They did 7 trillion last time to general consumers and around. They actually bailed out the banks to the tune of 21 trillion. That's a lesser known fact. That was it. The bond market turned. Now they demand higher interest rates and nobody wants to buy it. So the less people want to buy debt, the more the interest rates go higher. Eventually, when they're yielding a fortune and they're doing much more than the true inflation rate, you might get money back in prepared to invest. But at that point, many people will be so impoverished, their house prices have gone down, the car that they owe, a balloon payment on will be worth less than the balloon payment. They won't be able to get refi. By the way, 42% of mortgages right now in the US, refinances and applications included are being rejected. That means the originators of debt as an asset for a pension to buy no longer want to originate debt because they can't place it. 36% of car loans are being rejected. That is why I highlight these things. It's not a full-on asset, it's a current asset. You can think of property as a full-on asset, but this absolute move in gold that we're looking at here on the chart, as we're watching it trade to $3,325, is absolutely a sign of collapse. This is called fire insurance. This is called the whole world burns down fire insurance, and you had to kiss the leper to become part of this indebted colony. Everyone is synchronized. You've never seen a depression where the entire world is synchronized to be over indebted, and the worst hit will be the West. The worst hit will be the West, and you're watching this market for fire insurance doing what it does, go up when people are buying fire insurance. This literally is, as you can smell the fumes, the flames, wanting to come and engulf your home, the market for fire insurance. And that is gold. It is against the systemic failure of central banks, banking, and everything else. In short, and by the way, it's being driven by the big money first. This is not your retail Joe Schmo, your neighbor who's mowing the lawn on a weekend and you spot him out the corner of your window, running off to buy a single ounce of gold. This is central banks, institutions, hedge funds, Americans, Europeans, Chinese, everybody. This is a storm into the legacy reserve asset of millennia. Not waiting to be proven 13 years old Bitcoin. It is the legacy asset of millennia based on scarcity, unique properties, the fact that it can't be mined, that production keeps dropping. You can't get much more than 1.5% out production-wise in a year. Mines are quickly losing their yield, etc., etc., etc. This is it. It is really unique. And it is going up. And this is why people should be investing in gold, but people should just get there. Get there and put it in. And it's hard to do because actually it's a recession right now. You were told a long time ago it wasn't a recession. We said it was a recession. We said it's been a recession since you met the criteria for a recession. Of course, Biden hired a lot of DEI consultants directly into government, and then he hired a lot of people in other people, corporations that only worked with government, also were hiring because they were offering lots of contracts and saying, hire up, let's get these soft skill sets. And that masked the fact. And they said, look, you can't be in a recession. Look how strong the employment market is. These were all duffer jobs, soft jobs, most of which that doggy needs to now cut out. The entire theme of doggy and Elon Musk is based on the fact that America has to cut on the account that it's got $9 trillion to refinance before it spends its first dollar on the fiscal year of 2025. That was the landmine left. Literally, Yellen pulled the hand grenade pin, released the clip, and handed it to the next administration and said, good luck with handling that, and darted out the door. And that's where you're at. You've got $9 trillion to refi, and nobody wants to buy debt anymore. Why do you think Donald Trump, all these narratives, all this political theater, all this drama, all this thing, everything you're reading is all about how do we extract more money out of the people we're trading with? How do we stop having a trade deficit with nations like China? How do we make Europe pay us more money? How do we do this? How do we withdraw from being part of the defense system of Europe through NATO? Because we can't afford it anymore. We don't have the bottomless overdraft anymore. We now have a number that we've got to live within. There isn't an official number, but you have your black Amex that was literally bottomless is now being cut up, and you've been given a blue with $1,000 credit. That is your great downgrade. You've got to cut your living to fit that which you can get away with spending. And the ability to overspend is no longer there to the degree that you used to. And this is the debt markets.
Francis, could I stop you just for 1 second
Sure.
here?
Go ahead.
Put that in perspective, everybody. The excuse is being given to you because of what Francis is just explaining. It was out in the mainstream news media every day of the explanations as to why things were happening. Do you think people would still obey the rule of law? Do you think they would still invest tomorrow? Do you think they would even show up for work tomorrow? Like the absolute catastrophic devastation of an instant, like nuke for the mind would go off across the entire planet. People would just lose hope and never even want to step foot anywhere again, except maybe use the money they have to pull out of the bank to get money to grow food and buy tools. But, Francis, you hit on an important thing, like the synchronization of what is happening. It was like that with CV19 also, the synchronization there of all of them happening. So, that should have been a warning and a wake up to people that never on the history of the earth had all countries in unison done something lockstep like that. And we're at the end there, the overnight repo market was failing anywhere, and there was somewhere around $1 trillion a night anyway. That was what you're referencing in that point around 2020 and to 2019. But then the whole world goes lockstep. Now, my question is, are we looking at the world in lockstep decoupling on purpose again, just as the narrative was with CV19 to start to reset the system? Like that was the beginning of the reset. And if anybody didn't get the message, I'm sorry, you just didn't get the message. I'm glad you're here now listening, because this is your final time to listen before we have already stepped into a new world. And, thankfully, I've been listening to some people who've helped me get my mind and body and land and just everything in order for that change to be here. I hope I'm prepared as the best I can. But what about this decoupling in unison, synchronization here? Like, where does that liquidity move? If it's being drawn from one place, where's it going to go to? Because nothing goes to zero. So there's like a substantial, mixing of pieces on the board here, but that magic gold piece or that purple piece or whatever color it is of all the liquidity that's being gobbled up, swooped up, and transfer of wealth needs to go somewhere else. So maybe that's too many questions, but I'll throw it at you.
There's only one place it should be going, and that's into the gold market right now. The silver will run. It will lag first for a bit longer than people expect. That's my overall expectation, because we're going through a much bigger cycle, a much longer. As I've highlighted to you, the Federal Reserve is your enemy. They have essentially put you on a greased pole. And I mean, just highlighting this particular aspect here, for example, the Dow Jones. I've shown this chart to a lot of people, but essentially the Fed was created round about there, 1913. I'm hoping you.
Yeah, but look at the stability before that. You notice before the Fed could create and inflate and take away the purchasing power. Notice how it was pretty flat through that. Even if we were back on the bimetallic system before that, and then we went to the gold system after that. We went from a bimetallic dual payment system in America, and we moved to gold exclusively during that time as well, or shortly before there.
And I ask everybody exactly what you picked up on there, Dave. Is it from this chart your conclusion that the central banking cartel have brought stability to the system, or have they run a pump and dump scheme for which they can be the insiders, picking everything up at the bottom of the market and then running it up and selling out at the tops, thereby building their wealth at the cost of the citizenry? The key point I'm making here is you've got a long way to go. This is the Dow Jones divided by gold as a reminder. And you've got a long way downside to go still. This is in a log scale, and it goes right back to 1896. This is the creation of the Fed right here. And yes, they've added nothing but volatility to the system, no stability. And you went from 18.63 ounces at the roaring 20s to 1.8 to buy the basket of Dow shares. You went to 28 in 62, down to sub 0.99 in the lows of 1982. What happened there? Gold was through the roof after the hyperstagflation, after bombing a jungle in Vietnam to a cinder, more bombs than you've ever dropped, even in World War II. But no one felt it. No one noticed it. It was some far off place, a million miles away. Who was feasting like dogs? The military-industrial complex, all the arms dealers and all the dirty, filthy envelopes that get passed around in a very dark, non-transparent business where government contractors are spending people's money on munitions and arms. And all this talk about America spending 10 times what everybody else, I wonder how much of that is in transactional bungs and favors and everything else. You might not be getting the value you think on your 10x the rest of the world in armaments. Just a thought, but I don't want to over-egg that one. So here's the 2009 lows, the 2011 lows. That's where we dropped to in CV19. This has a long way to fall. My prediction, it runs that previous low and goes lower still. I've just got 0.58. You could go to 0.25. The bigger the boom, the harder the bust. The bigger the boom, each one's got bigger each time, more money, the bigger the bust. You had a little bounce here, you had this bounce there, but there's no more. The funding system for the debt-based system died after 2020. It is no longer considered a valuable asset. There's way too much of it around. There's no keen, mad buyers for debt. In fact, there's a lot of mad sellers, and China hasn't started yet, no matter what they tell you, and neither has Japan. And they have between them 1.1 trillion for Japan and 850 billion for China. It used to be $1 trillion, but most of it devalued on the massive 45% lots in capital value that the bond market had since our call, late 2020, that the debt market has turned. And this was the beginning of reset in terms of the financial aspect. The whole setup, obviously, of getting hopelessly over-indebted is there. As I mentioned, 42% of Americans are having now their applications to refi or mortgages rejected, and 36% of car loans. 36%. That is a massive amount of rejections hitting all-time highs. Bankruptcies here at an all-time high. What's the significance of the car loan and the mortgages? Because they do not want to originate more debt. Because you're saying, here's another asset for someone to buy, along with the other 9 trillion that is based on government. And this is based on Joe Schmo's ability to pay for his car, and Joe Schmo's ability to pay for his house, and Charlie Brown, et cetera, et cetera. None of them. They're all going to get wrecked if the government goes bust, because the government is going to go scavenging for tax. It's going to get more aggressive and more totalitarian. Look at Trump. Essentially, he's dealing with a US that is essentially running into financial issues, and they get aggressive. That's what people do when you catch them lying. They get aggressive. Someone who's cheated and frauded, they get aggressive. They say, are you calling me a thief just because I've got your wallet in my pocket? You know, it's kind of like that. It's that they're getting aggressive because they need to try find. You can't accuse China of overproducing. You were overbuying and you were overborrowing. That is it. And you've actually squandered the exorbitant privilege. When I say that, again, I refer to the parasitic classes that have gone about the total controlled setup and now demolition of the great nation of United States of America with its lovely people. That is the true story. And this is the big one. It's a debt-based collapse. Everything debt will drop immensely, potentially to zero, but very, very low. And how do you defend yourself against that? Gold is it. First gold, go through first gold phase. This still has a long, long way to collapse.
Now, with that 0.58 down at the bottom, what would you anticipate the price of an ounce of gold being if you're going to be buying the entire Dow basket for a half an ounce of gold? Like, that's impossible right now as we see it. So what would you put a valuation on that? Because
the journey to that means 24x. To get to 0.5, let's just say. Let's say I've got this down at 0.5 and that's my prediction. We're guessing, we're talking about the future. So, you know, let's just keep the numbers simple, 0.5, and you're at 12. Let's just say it's 12 right now. It's 12.09, 12.1, but let's call it 12. 12 to point, that's 24x. We're talking about a 25 times. Now, the key part of that, some of that's made by gold's appreciation, and some of that's in the devaluation of the Dow, because it's hypervalued too. So if the Dow halves, you go from here, it would be a 12 times for gold. If the Dow, because it's done it 2x to the downside, essentially. So that gives you half, it takes you part the way to it. So you're asking me, I'm giving you the total number, 24 times. That's only if you short the Dow by 100,000 and you put 100,000 in gold. At the end of all of this, when we get to this point, whatever date, year it is in, and the trade's there, you will have made 24 times on your money. And that'll be made up of gold appreciation and Dow devaluation. How much is which? I actually can't tell you what the number. Don't forget the dollar's devaluing, so the Dow will still have a number. It's not going to zero. There's still companies that do something useful. We're still going to need them. America isn't disappearing off the map and all the buildings with it, and everybody's need to eat, do various things. But the level of expenditure is going to be so brutal, and the overshoot to the downside as people get bankrupted and closed out and denied credit and then can't live, and the lack of everybody's going to want to work, and there's going to be nobody who's got the money to employ and pay. This is your big problem. The overshoot to the downside is going to require government intervention. This is why UBI is being discussed. This is why CBDCs are being discussed. This is why compliance and the control over the CBDCs, total surveillance grid financial network, is all about what they're bringing. And that is how you'll say, listen, if you do your push-ups and you do this and you take your chip in your arm and we can check that you've done that, you can get X number of tokens and you can buy a hamburger with that.
Yeah, and you notice it's right. You know, for instance, it's right in time also for the new rollout of the Real ID right here coming up next month. And then also subsequently with under 3 years, you will have to use facial recognition to travel anywhere on the planet, at least outside of a U.S. airport. To either travel internally, you'll have to use facial recognition. Obviously, you're going to board international flights. Like, really, what is, like, as a statistician, and you understand, you know, numbers and possibilities, and what is the possibility of all of these things landing in the exact same several years? And then we come into the real amplification point of all this restructuring, and now they want you in the exact same years of this massive gargantuan crop losses and restructuring of the economy to start doing facial recognition and getting your biometrics all put into place all this year, as all of this is all happening at the same time. You know, statistician wise or statistically, I think go near zero.
They want chaos, and you're going to be kept reeling that you won't have enough time to work everything out. That's how you suppress your enemy. You just overwhelm them. You might remember Rumsfeld, shock and awe. A military approach. This is how they're going to shock and awe you, but it's not bombs they're dropping on you and fire. It's events. You could have, at the same time as your bank going bust, taking all your stuff. You don't own your stock certificates. So Charles Schwab actually doesn't really have your shares anymore in your gold miners. You don't have paper certificates because they cancel that system. The main treasury guy that holds it, you find out there's multiple claims on it. They were just running a pool and just giving you the profit on it, like a derivative proxy, which is kind of how it is. Mr. Webb explained that, by the way. I forget his first name, of the Great Taking.
Rogers Webb, yeah, great. It was,
that's
yeah,
it.
The Great
Taking. You know, these are Americans telling Americans about America. So don't be hurt by me with my foreign accent. These are your guys telling you how it goes, and that's what's going to happen. He's done the research. He wrote the book. You don't own what you think you own. Unless you physically hold it, you don't own it. And they're going to want to put property onto the tokenize it and put it on the grid. And they're going to accelerate that. And certain cryptos that are facilitating that will go up. And our goal is to help people build wealth during this time, because actually, in a perverse way, there are going to be many opportunities to make a lot of money in these high decades in weeks times. You know, you have decades where nothing happens, and then you have weeks where decades happen. You're coming into the acceleration. This is the quickening right now. And this is also the great leveling for most people, because they don't understand how the system works and how they're going to be beaten up by the financial attack vector that is your government, your central banking cartel, and your commercial bankers and all your stock trading brokers and the clearance systems that they developed that preserve them and steal from you. Remember, this is why it's a war. You don't even realize you're in a war. You're in a financial war in that sense. And you should work on your health, your wealth, your community building, your farmers, lands, and agricultural viewers here. And you need to make sure that you have a bit of ground on the level community. And that's going to be super, super important. Self-reliance on power and many other things. There's going to be blackouts, there'll be mobile network downturns. Whenever things are crazy, that they don't want you selling stocks while the insiders are selling stocks, they'll take down the general grid system. But trust me, there'll be internet connections that'll still work for the insiders and politicos who will be dumping in an almost empty market until they've crashed it and you get left behind. There is a real deleveraging that has to happen, because there's been absolute decades of leveraging up. and it's a phase like night that follows day, and we all have to go through it. But you were born for these times. You can live and you can succeed in these times. You weren't wanting an easy life, you were wanting an interesting life and to test yourself, and there's far more sense of reward by seeing your way through this. But do understand, you're facing probably one of the single biggest challenges. I will say to certain people, and this is not a popular message, but it's not unsmart to consider seeing this whole thing through from another country. Because
yeah, that brings me to my next question. That's a great point there. So one of the points I had written down, okay, this is all seems Western centric, or whether it be Australia or, you know, Europe or whatnot, or United States. But where are some locations planet-wide that will be the least affected? Because I was thinking Indonesia, because I like to surf, and you said enjoy your days and get back to what you do. I got the farm out here. I've been learning to grow how to grow food on more of an industrial scale for the last 4 years. But, you know, like, where do we go if it all falls apart? Because you can stay here and get rolled over by a tank. Because I tell you, in Ukraine, when I was over there years and years and years ago, I was like, nobody will ever, ever, never, ever, ever find you. I mean, this might be a good location, because I was looking at Republic of Georgia and some of these bread baskets that weren't so heavily affected by this grand solar minimum 400-year cycle in crop productions. And I was thinking, nobody's ever going to find you out here. It is so remote out here. And damn, look where it just, everything's just right in the middle of the war zone. Like, there is nowhere to hide. So if you're considering pulling back somewhere and hiding in somewhere, you just never know if that conflict is going to come out to you. And at some point, all your plans may just go poof into the mist, and you may have to leave your location. But where would you go to? Again, location, planet-wide, that would be least affected.
So that's not an easy answer, because there's no Narnia, which is heaven, perfect. The reason we're in first world countries and we thought we've been so lucky for most of our childhood and adulthood is because they had high standards of living. And what you're doing, and I'm going to throw a Canadian or an Americanization to you, is you're no longer skating after the puck. Skate to where the puck's going, not where it is now. And right now, the standard of living is higher in the US, it's higher in Europe, it's higher in the UK than it is in many places in South Africa, which is actually an aggregate, Indonesia, Bali, Latin America, Uruguay, potentially. Oh, I would say Uruguay is pretty high. But the trend is your friend. It's where you will be in the next 10, 15 years. If you're my age, you're thinking about, you know, in 10, 15 years, I'm going to be a lot slower, tireder, probably not working particularly hard, certainly not doing manual labor, not wanting to, and wanting to be pretty well funded to retire out in a pretty secure and safe place. When you're old, you're not a kung fu fighter anymore. You want to be secure. And those are my considerations. If you're young and still to make your fortune, you might want to position according to that. So Indonesia, for example, that you mentioned, is a cracking place from a point of view of demographics. They have the young population. They've got their big growth rates, lots of kids. And unlike the inverted population curves of the West, which are sort of boomer generation and a big void that's got to carry this heavy pensioner debt liability and pay and stump up for them while getting no potholes fixed in the road, no new airports, no new anything. You might want to rather go to a place like Indonesia, where the elderly are very minimal relative to the youth. The youth is growing, and it's shown that demographics drive economic growth. You need things. Now, there is AI, there is automation. We probably don't need them quite so much as we used to. We can with productivity, but you still will need people. People will still socialize and be with people. So positioning for a demographic where you can have a really good business, and you'll be wiser, older, a little bit more mature. They're non-aggressive nation, for example, Indonesia. They're a small nation, pretty friendly. Look, it's not your culture, but it's not home anymore. You're having to leave if you choose to leave. So the discussion is now about a migration and an event. I've chosen South Africa because I was born there, and I left there when their times were going bad. I've come back a wealthier man than most of my people who stayed, because they went through the apartheid era, the fall of apartheid, and the new government, and a lot of the loss of the currency strength. And I was earning pounds and dollars during that period, and I was able to scale and grow a business, and I reacted. You have to leave. Go where you're treated best. And right now, I'm telling you, exit taxes are going to come for America. I'm saying potential foreign exchange controls are going to come for America. Why? Because when you start losing, when the debt starts crashing, and everyone will blame it on whoever's the president at the moment. None of this is actually to do with Trump or tariffs. It's the fact that you can't spend what you need to spend anymore, and you need a way to find some more money. You're scrounging. You're trying to get more money out of Europe because they've got a trade surplus with you. You're trying to get more money out of China because they've also got a trade surplus with you. You're spending too more. Doggy's trying to cut out of all the corruption and all the other stuff. It's all because now you have to care more about the number. Biden,
well, people will forget, Francis. People are going to forget during this chaos time of what you talk about insider trading and this and that. By the time this thing runs its course, even another year or two from now, you're going to forget the names of these people. You're never even going to remember what happened. Just like in COVID-19, tell me from 2020 the big names that you remember. You can't hardly remember anything. It was such a trauma event. You're just like stuck in an encapsulated thing here. So these people are going to disappear in the mist. You're never going to remember the names. Half the thing's fog of war right now anyway of economics. So these people are just going to do their thing and disappear in the mist, like
and steal the money. And
the accountability is not there.
Central banks have been pursuing inflationary policies. You had Ron Paul spell it out to you. If you want one American to listen to and to take as an example locally, because you're finding it hard to hear it from me, go listen to Ron Paul. He's told you we should have all our military out. We should have cut our spending. Guess what? You're going to have to do all of that anyway, but you're going to do it as a busted bankrupt. If you'd done it when he was there, you would have cut your costs. You would have done, I'm not sure you would have been able to turn it around in the time he had, but you'd be in a lot better position than you are today. He's the best president you never had because he's principle-based. The rest are just captured. Contemplate it at least, because the downdraft that comes, the taxation, the registration, governments are going to go into scavenge mode, and the only captured people they have, the prisoners, are their citizens.
Back to the acquiescence here. So in CV19, you had the chance to continue to work at your job, or you could get that jab or not, and you would lose your job. And now you see that there's so many lawsuits coming back saying, oh, now that a lot of people are winning these lawsuits and getting millions of dollars for rejecting that, getting fired. But how many years has it come to take around? All right, so the degradation and the absolute wiping out of small and medium businesses, the only thing allowed to operate at that time were the big box stores or the Fortune 500 associated companies and affiliates. Now we come to it again with these tariffs coming in. I am seeing video after video of people that have imports that are like, we're out of business again. We survived the vid, but now we come 2.0 and we have no chance of surviving this because all of our inventory, like that's the same thing. Like they don't have inventory to sell. So I don't care if you have the money, there's nothing for you to buy. And it's the same thing with food. I don't care how much money you have. If you don't have the physical food in front of you, you're going to starve. So now we're coming to 2.0. We got the complete wipeout of whoever survived COVID and was lucky enough to like maneuver through that, and like intelligent people survived, the fittest of the fittest business wise. But now we're coming into another thing that I really think is, is this the end of small businesses we know? Is this what the true plan was, is to whoever survived through the COVID this was the thing in the tariff plan to take them absolutely out at the knees? There's very few small businesses that will survive this maneuver with all these things coming from other nations that aren't coming anymore.
CV19 was devastating for SMEs and very good for amalgamating monopolies of the big box companies, as you call them, Amazon, your one world retailer of choice. And I would encourage everyone to find other smaller businesses to buy online from rather than Amazon. But anyway, that's a moot point. You highlighting that again, that actually the cutouts that have been added, for example, are all for Apple, device makers, consumer electronic brands, etc., etc. But say you're a small manufacturer in the US that just does plastic moldings for something or other, refrigerators locally made or something like that, and you're affected by all these tariffs. It's devastating for your business. It's entirely devastating because your input costs have just rocketed because China's put counter tariffs. And when they land, America's going to tariff it. And now you have to sell your molding product to whatever it does to your wholesaler who's going to make the final product. And you're someone in the supply chain there. You've just been broken. You've been completely broken by this. But the big surveillance finance grid system, guys, chip makers, Apple, device makers like Samsung, etc., from South Korea, etc., are all getting cutouts and clearances so that they can continue to operate. And tariffs is doing it again. This is a great leveling. This is why I started, and I said quite early, this is a financial war against yourselves, perpetuated by the parasitic, controlled by handlers, government that you've had over multiple cycles, blue and red, that have slowly built up this hyper debt, hyper valued pump that you now in the capitulation phrase from, as I showed you on the Dow in gold ounces. And gold is the canary in the gold mine. that highlights this perversion. And you are in that period now where the only thing to hold is gold. And I still warn people, they're going to try bug us gold bugs. They're going to try punish us with unrealized capital gains and all sorts of things. Maybe don't be there.
You know, the last point, you know, would you consider this the Great Shutdown? Because you just mentioned as an isolationist, it seems that we're not choosing now. China is choosing not to send any goods. Amazon ceased all orders to the United States coming out of China. So just even that alone should send shivers up your spine that nothing is coming from China and nothing outbound from America. That's 1/3 of all U.S. beef.
When
is
you're
not going there.
in a recession and people start doing that, you know you're heading for a depression. And you know that's how they try push the rates down on the debt a little bit. But it won't work. People will still not be the best buyers, but you know, you're eventually hoping to try and get the debt down because you're actually stopping global trade and you're wanting to size down the entire economy. And, you know, globalization saw a bigger pot generally, and everyone generally get richer, and the cost of production get lower. Now you're reversing that. So this is hyper stagflation. Globalization was high growth, assets bubbles and low cost goods. That's what globalization gave you.
And that's why we're going to rewind the clock. We're rewinding it back down.
Now you've lived that day. Now you have to sleep through its evil twin, the night. And the evil twin, the night of that version, is exactly the opposite of all those things I mentioned. Devaluation to very low levels of assets, stock market and property, debt collapse, where you actually had debt expansion in the other period. You had very low, it was the Goldilocks economy. There was no inflation, Greenspan. Now you have stubbornly high inflation despite very low growth. That is called stagflation, and it will be a hyper version of that. In other words, an extremer version, even more so than the 70s. Yeah, you don't want to do that, and you're going to do it, and you're going to do it on a far bigger scale, and you're going to have the rest of the world do it. So global trade goes down, and this is why we're short oil. We're inside the commodity structure. They call gold and oil commodities. Gold is a reserve asset, and it's money, and it's your insurance against systemic collapse. It's way more than a commodity. But essentially, we're long one commodity and short another by other people's labeling, not by ours. We're long real money and reserve assets, and we're short oil. And what's happening? It's already spilled. Of course, there's going to be less oil. There's going to be less expenditure. China's not going to have the same reasons to build as much stuff. They're going to go on go slow production. Otherwise, they're going to have inventory buildup. The resources, they're going to have no buyers. They're going to have to do discounts. They're going to lose margin. They've got to right size. All of this is going to hurt China. Don't listen to me saying all these dark things about America and the West and say and believe that I think there's no collateralized effects on the other nations. But certain things still have to be bought, you know, especially when it comes to foods, especially when it comes to other things that are perishable. But the car market could be half the size. It could even be 25% of the size at the bottom of the depths. How many car makers survive that process? You know, you're already hearing of Volkswagen, a massive group with some incredible brands. It's the first time they've ever closed plants in Germany, ever. But it will end, and it's still a great life. And you can't put a price on loving, living, breathing, and being healthy. But they're going to come with many attack vectors, and there's going to be multiple stages to this. So maybe don't be in the eye of the storm. Maybe watch it, where you can at least sit back on a sofa and have some popcorn and occasionally have some rest, and it not be as bad as where it will be. It's going to get dark in all the Western nations, particularly. There will be collateral damage in the other nations. There is no perfect place to go, but the whole world has to go through this process because the very dominant nations of eras of empire, from the British, European, and American, are all in a state of collapse. That has to have a collateral effect on other nations that we're used to selling to them. It's time to focus on building wealth, preserving the wealth you have and the future wealth you build, and securing yourself freedoms by optionality. That is what the Market Sniper YouTube channel is 100% focused on. That is what we aim to do and deliver to our best of our abilities. All plans will not work, but having some plans and some measures certainly will. And I'm better positioned for this in spite of recognizing I've got so much more still to do.
Francis Hunt, themarketsniper.com, and also think like a Sumerian, because gold has been revered and used for over 7,000 years. The first instance of it being used, cataloged on a cuneiform clay tablet, was from Sumeria. So for the last 7,000 years, that has been a useful item to own and have to survive through the calamities, the rise and fall of empires, and the collapse of civilizations and their reemergence. It still holds the same value. It can be traded anywhere. It's going to be an interesting world to move through. So Francis Hunt, thank you so much. And please remember, if China does fall, all that investment money that was going into Africa for their Belt and Road Initiative is also going to shrivel up. So we should see subsequent things happening across Africa, because my whole point was they're going to start growing food there to restart the new debt economy after it reemerges in African Sahel, because the rainfall is increasing there. And as food declines across the rest of the planet, they're going to move it over there. So this whole thing, in addition to what Francis was saying, like perhaps some of these nations you never thought would be viable, who had the highest growing economy last year, one of them in the world, Ethiopia, because the new Renaissance Dam had filled and is providing constant electricity now. So all the industries are booming there. So we're just watching everything rinse and repeat in a different part of the planet, as crazy as that sounds. But Francis, thank you so much for your time. And everybody out there, leave some comments below, and I will be happy to look through those and answer the best I can. And make sure you reach out to Francis there at themarketsniper.com. You can have some further conversations if this seems like it fits for you. But anyway, bye for now.